We were at this really cool club that I thought was the coolest club I'd ever been to in Manhattan. And I felt like if there was ever a night that I could really feel okay, this is it. I later learned that it was lidocaine, not cocaine. I remember being in the bathroom in line for the toilet and just thinking, wow, I'm getting tunnel vision, and what a cool side effect that is. That I was dying didn't occur to me. But then when I got in the stall, I could not read any of the graffiti. And I knew some of this is in English, and what's wrong with my brain that I can't read it. Then I began to feel there was no air in the club. And I went back to my friend and said, there's no air down here, there's no air. So on the outside, I had a grand mal seizure, and the bartender began to do CPR. Felt like I had hit my chin on the bar, and that it had worked like a Popeye punch to shoot me straight up in the air. And then I went up into this pure blue sky, and I was just filled with euphoria. And I did have a sense of me as myself, but I forgot all about kind of the job of being Louisa in the world. Like that whole thing had been left with the bullshit down there. I had this feeling that I could do a back bend and a back dive. And so I thought, I'm going to do a reverse swan dive because I can do stuff. That's the feeling I had, you know. I was really like a little kid, excited. So I bent over backwards. It worked perfectly. I did this backwards swan dive. And then I see that the ocean is under me. And I have a brief thought like, oh, isn't it like concrete when you hit the ocean and you're moving really, really fast? And instead of fear, I just had, well, we'll find out. You know, there's no fear. And so I hit it and it went okay. And I went way down deep under the water. Could see that beautiful, you see it sometimes in underwater scuba diving movies where the bubbles are going up around you. I saw the surface way up there. And I had another little thought like, wow, that surface is way up there. I wonder if I can get there okay. And again, then I'm there right away and it's no problem. Then I see the shore. And I wish I could say it was a beautiful tropical shore, but it was not. It was kind of I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and it was kind of a Pacific Northwest beach, meaning a lot of barnacles and a lot of seaweed, and it's not like gorgeous like that. But I thought, oh, I want to be there. So the next thing I know, I'm just wading out of the water. I turned along the beach and I saw a house up on a mesa. I thought, oh, I want to be there. And so then I'm there. And my feeling is like, wow, cool, with everything. Wow, cool. And so one thing though was that the mesa now was kind of a pile of boulders and they were covered with this really gross slime. It was like rotten seaweed was what I thought. To get to the doorway of this house, I had to climb through it. A lot of people talk about that there's some gross stuff we carry with us, this purging that has to happen, that you shed your anger, your fear, all of these darker emotions. To me, I feel like the sludge was that stuff. I didn't know at the time, though. I didn't know anything about NDEs at all. So I just thought, phew, that's over with. Once I got above it to the doorway, I had lost my body. I had no body, but I was a little bit Alice in Wonderland and a little bit Snake. Kind of like a slightly bummed that I don't have a higher perspective, but I can go over the door sill into the house. And so I'm like, hey, good enough. And I'm very low along the ground, so much so that I saw the floorboards in tremendous detail. They were very worn. It was very old. Many people had walked there. And I knew it was my ancestors. In real life, the twerpy vain girl who's back in the New York nightclub did not give a crap about her ancestry, never thought about her ancestors. The spirit that entered this house was thrilled. Like, we all go here and now it's my turn. And I'm so excited to join the rest of us. And I had the feeling of us. So I also sensed my grandfather. Now he is the only one who I never got to meet. I sensed his joy that we would finally get to meet. Who was he to me? A picture in my dad's closet, you know, but I felt all this joy at the prospect of meeting him. So there was supposed to be a chair in the middle of this room that looked out at the water. I knew there was supposed to be an armchair, and I knew that my ancestors all loved to sit in it and look at the view. And the sun had started setting. I wanted the chair, but it wasn't there. But as soon as I said, oh, I wish I could see the sunset, then I started getting pulled along the floor. And even though I didn't have a body, it felt like I was pulled by my heart towards the windowsill. And then up, and I'm thinking, wow. And then over the windowsill, and I started flying across the water, across the path of light that the sun made across the water. I was flying toward the sun. Sometimes little bits of my life would come back to me, and I would think, hey, wait a minute. People can't fly. Is this a dream? Is this real? That's what I thought. And then something answered me, more real than anything you've ever known or done. And I was heading toward the sun, and then I had a thought, it's getting bigger and bigger. I'm going to hit it. Again, without fear, just we'll see what happens. And then I hit the sun and passed through a sort of a filament, and I was in the core of it. Now, knowing what I know now about NDE symbolism, this is so beautiful, because I was an atheist. And I rejected and really despised everything about the church and everything I'd heard about God. But when a human being sees a sunset, we all get a feeling of awe. That's why my higher power led me along that path. I felt awe towards the beauty of the sun. And also my father had taught me that the sun was the giver of life. So if you were to have a physical representation of the source of me, the source of life, it would be the sun. So when I went into the sun, then I was in the light for real. And I was permeated with that joy and that bliss and that love beyond measure. And I was starving for it. And I remember having the feeling like, finally. And then I had the sense, almost instantly, that I was being held the way a baby is held by a parent. I couldn't see anything because all I saw was the light, but you can know things without seeing them visually. And I knew that the parent was embracing me, and I knew that the parent was pouring this love into me. I was ready to just hang out there forever. I was so complete and happy, and I loved the parent too. That's one thing I can say, I had love back. And all of a sudden, the parent says, you can't stay, you're not done yet. And then it's lights out, just like when the parents cut the light. It went from the light and the bliss to blackness, total blackness, and a slight sense of falling. That was the only time in my NDE that I was afraid, was that bit of falling. But then I was just kind of in a black realm, seeing these little white stick figures like they were drawn with chalk on a blackboard. This was my transition. And they were playing these little nonsense games, going on a swing set, going on a teeter-totter. And they were just little happy figures. And they were saying these little nonsense things like how many hippos in a flim-flam and like these little, and I thought, well, this is nowhere near as good as the light, but this is a sort of a diversion that the parent has given me until I can go back, because I knew I was going back sometime. And so I thought, well, I'll just watch these guys for eternity, forever, for however long it takes to go back. And then one of the stick figures got closer, and the chalk circle of the face filled in like a dinner plate. And I remember feeling like, yo, dude, I can't see, like everybody else. And then he started saying, how many fingers? What is your name? And then I remembered, and this is hard for people who fear death to imagine, but instead of saying like, oh, thank God I didn't die, I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. I remember this stuff. He thinks that he's a he and I'm a me, and he thinks we're like separate. And he wants me to do that trick where you like burp out sounds and it's like in a code so he can know something. And I just thought, I just don't want to do that anymore. But then he's very persistent. And so I rose to the occasion and I said, Louisa, and 3. And then I kind of had this sense of, okay, I give up. I got to do this. And as I said to you, I felt like I'd been told I have to stay in kindergarten for 50 years.
If you care to watch the full unedited interview, I have it linked right here. Also in the description. If you are new to the channel, you can go ahead and subscribe by clicking on my face right there. Hope you have a good day. See you next time.